The New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation promotes, preserves, and perpetuates music, culture, and heritage through programs, cultural, educational, and economic activities year-round. Learn more at jazzandheritage.org. The American Italian Cultural Center and Museum on South Peters in New Orleans offers event venue space, Italian language classes, dual citizenship and translation services, seminars, genealogy, and trips to Italy. Ciao! AmericanItalianCulturalCenter.com. This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. A Steppin' Out special. It's Carnival time.
I'm Peggy Scott Laborde, and welcome to Steppin' Out, It's Carnival Time. I am delighted to say that since 1987, for this special edition, I have had as my guests Arthur Hardy, publisher of Arthur Hardy's Mardi Gras Guide, now in its 48th annual edition. Congratulations. Arthur also covers Carnival for Fox 8 News and the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and also NOLA.com. And congratulations, because you are being honored with a porcelain figure from Haydell's in their long line of porcelain figures. Huh?
Thank you, Peggy.
It's a very big deal.
It is an honor and a lot of fun, too.
Yeah, and some people call it Fev. It's an old French tradition, too. Congrats.
Thanks.
And Errol Laborde, executive editor for Renaissance Publishing and author of Mardi Gras, Chronicles of the New Orleans Carnival, and the brand new book, When Rex Met Zulu and Other Chronicles of the New Orleans Experience. Both are authors of numerous Carnival history books. Welcome, E.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Where can I get one of those little feathers?
Oh, Haydell's.
Like
very cute.
Is that what you found, like in a king cake or something?
Well, that's sort of the idea. That's the idea.
A shameless plug.
That's okay. We don't mind shameless plugs. Arthur, what's new this year, kiddo?
A lot. To me, the biggest thing is new is the same kind of. The parade routes are set to pre-COVID standards, so we're not going to have to worry about will Toth be able to start uptown. Everybody has their parade routes again, and that's really big. You know, it was a big issue last year thanks to outside police. We've gained 3 new parades in Jefferson Parish, Cirrus, Nandy, and Music. 2 of those are on the West Bank. Covington is a major new Fat Tuesday parade called Bugafly, how appropriate. The city has a new carnival recycling program that is really picking up steam. They're going to have 6 recycle hubs on the uptown route where you can bring things to recycle. And I think that's a terrific idea. We're seeing more environmentally friendly throws. That's also good. And there's a new exhibit at the Louisiana State Museum that salutes costume designer Sam Nicholas. And you remember Sam. He worked for Endymion, Orpheus, Toth, Okeanos, Pizza, a bunch of clubs. And there's actually a musical about his life that had a debut on off-Broadway one night only. It was scheduled that way, and it's going to play in New Orleans, too. A terrific exhibit at the Louisiana State Museum with more than 100 of original watercolor costumes and fashion designs. That opens February 1st and will be here for more than a year. So that's a really big deal, and he was a wonderful designer, and it's good to see him get the credit and the publicity he deserves.
He was a larger-than-life figure, as I recall.
He was. He was quite a character, and just had some great ideas and really revolutionized costume design in New Orleans.
Well, Errol, let's talk about the boom in the Carnival walking clubs. It's just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and first let me say that there's always discussion whether these are, you call them marching clubs or walking clubs. To me, the top marching club is the Marines, okay? Okay, these aren't the Marines by any means, okay? And so I think walking club is a good explanation, because they walk and they dance and they have fun. There's always been some. I think one of the oldest that still exists is the Jefferson City Buzzards. It started in the 1890s, and you have from uptown the Corner Club, and in various other organizations, the Lions Club, not the animal, but the street. What we've seen more of lately, I think it's a wonderful addition to Mardi Gras, are walking clubs that are in parades. They're not separate entities, but they're in parades. And Muses gets a lot of credit for this, because Muses opened up responsibilities for these groups. and they're almost entirely women. They're funny. They have funny names. Some are a little bit double entendre kind of names. Okay, you have to know what they're talking about. What I like about them in terms of a parade is that they're close to the street. They're close to the people. So it's not like having to wait, like, for a big float and all that. And the more of those, I think they've brought some real humor to Carnival. And so I credit Muses, and still to this day, Muses has a lot of those crews. And so there are other groups and other cruises, but some of the names, just trying to think of it as the Amelia Earharts, who dress like airline stewardesses, the Pussyfooters, that's one of those Muses era names, the Bearded Oysters, a couple of new ones, La Boheme, which walk around in the French Quarter. And then a couple of them that really don't walk, they ride. I think one of the funniest things in all of Mardi Gras is the Lazy Boys. And these guys who are in these lounge chairs, and they're motorized lounge chairs, and they have a little table to the side, they're drinking. What a clever idea. And then, of course, the Rolling Elfi. So there's a lot of these smaller independent groups. I noticed a lot of them are Muses, and actually Arthur has a list in his book about some of these, in which parades they're in. Tux is very receptive to them also. And I think it's a good service to be doing. So you can find them and you can enjoy them. I just think they're fun. I hope there's more of them.
Let me add a PS, the Dame de Prolage, where they do the heavily beaded bodice. Each year they have some kind of theme.
Yeah.
And last year there was actually a Funny 40 Fellows one. They were paying tribute to different small groups.
Yeah. Each year they have a theme. Before this, the only really beadwork you saw in Mardi Gras was the Mardi Gras Indians. But the Dame de Prolage, and what they do is that they get together, they come up with a theme, and every member has something to do related to the theme. It's something different. I know a Dame de Prolage, and heaven help you if you ask them what she's doing this year, because it is a secret. It is more secretive than comas. Okay, and then they
and more fun.
But then they come up. It's a lot of work, and I appreciate that. It's a lot of work. It's not something like a million people are going to see, like the Buff Gras or something like that. But I appreciate it. It's an old tradition that they've brought to Mardi Gras, and it's really meticulous work, and what they do is really good.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Well, speaking of work, lots of anniversaries. Some crews have worked very hard to last so long.
Well, not just crews, but this is the 325th anniversary of Mardi Gras in Louisiana, at least in name. In 1699, Iberville planted the flag and said, "This is Point du Mardi Gras and Bayou Mardi Gras," so that goes back a long time.
Near Fort Jackson.
At Fort Jackson, about 60 miles south of where New Orleans would be founded, 19 years later. But we have three really significant anniversaries this year, and these were all former neighborhood clubs. Okeanos, which used to start on St. Claude Avenue, 75th anniversary, and they're really doing well, 350 riders. Mid-City, 90th anniversary, of course, it started in Mid-City, St. Patrick's Canal, and it didn't move until Uptown until 2002. An interesting thing about them, we all remember the greatest bands in Dixie contest from 1963 to 1985. But in researching a story we did, Jimmy Clark, who wrote about them in our Mardi Gras guide, and I didn't know this, they never paraded through the French Quarter, ever. And they had the legal right to, but they didn't. They always took a turn up Rampart Street to go to the auditorium. And then the biggest anniversary this year is the crew of Carrollton, their 100th. It's the fourth oldest parade in Carnival, 675 members, 27 floats. Big, gorgeous parade. And that Carrollton Sunday's always been very special to me. It's the first big Sunday of the parade season, and they're looking forward to just a terrific parade this year.
Absolutely, and it's also another really wonderful anniversary, the 75th anniversary of Louis Armstrong as King of the Zulus.
Yep, and he wound up on the cover of Time magazine that year. We did a lot of research about that event, and one of the things I learned was there was as many white people who went to see that parade as black people. It was such an important thing. WTPS, the old Times-Picayune radio station, and WWL both broadcast that parade. And it lasted forever. There's a great story about his float breaking apart at 6 o'clock that night on Orleans and North Prairie.
I think a lot of people wanted pieces of it.
Well, they did. There were souvenir hunters there. And he actually had ridden in Zulu on the King's float without a costume in 1946. Him and his vocalist, and without any fanfare at all. He just wanted to ride, but it was such a very big deal. And his managers made sure that his band was busy the time that he brought his best players, Jack Teagarden, some other people, to town with him. and they did 4 nights of performances. Sunday night at the Booker T. Washington Gym is where they had the Zulu Ball. I happen to have an autographed program from that Pops signed himself. Then on Mardi Gras itself, after this, well, let me back up. Monday night on Lundi Gras, which it wasn't called that then, but Lundi Gras on Monday, they did a gig in New Iberia. Him and his band got back at 6 in the morning, Fat Tuesday. 2 hours later, he had to get on a float.
Wow.
Then Mardi Gras night, he played a concert at the old Coliseum.
Coliseum Arena.
Yeah, arena,
used
yeah,
to
not
call
the
it.
theater.
Yeah.
And then on Ash Wednesday, they had a job in Jackson, Mississippi. So he was a busy guy.
Well, this is something about actually Carrollton and Mid-City. Your point is right that Carrollton to a lot of people was when the parades really started. It was on Sunday. There were miscellaneous parades on that Saturday, some uptown that didn't last. But Carrollton was, first of all, it was the first day parade of the season. And so that was really the beginning. And it was a big scene along the neutral ground along Canal Street. And then I think Okeanos would parade around the thing, right? So that was really, really a big day. But Mid-City was really always a special. Mid-City started in 1934.
Yeah.
And that was in that era. There was a growth of parades, a spurt of parades in Mardi Gras, largely because the Municipal Auditorium had opened in 1930. And people loved the idea. Here was a building that you could have carnival balls, and then you actually had an entrance, where a rider can get off the float. And that really changed it. But also, Mid-City introduced the foil. Yeah. And to me, it's still the only really foil parade. Yeah. It introduced animation that you have all kind of things that spin and all that. And I think for most of them that their energy power was Boy Scouts that they had in there who
inside the float.
Who would turn anything. They always had like a family-friendly kind of theme, and for the longest period of time, the king and queen were always married. And their greatest bands in Dixie contest, which meant a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah. One of my earliest Mardi Gras memories is seeing the Mid-City Parade at the corner of North Carrollton and Canal Street. I lived just a few blocks from there, and it was just terrific. One other thing I have to tell you about Pops, Satchmo, Louis Armstrong. Barry Kern is doing a special float to honor the 75th anniversary. It'll be in front of the King's float this year.
Okay.
So it's going to get the recognition we think it deserves.
Oh, I love that. Just a final little addition on Zulu and Louis Armstrong. Doc Sushan, of course, beloved New Orleans doctor, but also musician. His daughter was Queen of Carnival, Diane Sushan.
1949.
A wonderful civic activist and so involved with Mardi Gras herself. And he had this problem because he wanted to go see Pops, Louis Armstrong, who he adored, and his daughter at the Boston Club out on the balcony. He got to do both, but it was pretty tough to do them at the same time. Now, Eve, we're going to go way back because 1872, the notables, the carnival celebrities at Rex Parade.
Well, this year, I guess it means something to some people, that Mardi Gras is February 13th. And the first Rex Parade in 1872 was on February 13th. I think within that period, there's only been one other date, and that's been February 13th. So it's just kind of interesting that this is the same date as the first parade of the first Rex organization. And so, which was really a breakthrough moment in Carnival, because this was the first major daytime parade. And once it became established, that started the momentum towards making it a big holiday and that sort of thing. But there were some people who were notable, who were celebrities at their time, that were there. One of them, of course, the biggest name was the Grand Duke Alexis, who had been part of a tour of the United States and was working his way back down toward the east, and got a lot. People were enamored by Russians at the time, because the United States had recently bought Alaska, and we weren't enemies then. There was no Cold War. And so they went to see a Grand Duke. Also in New Orleans was a performer called Lydia Thompson. She was called a burlesque performer. Burlesque at the time didn't necessarily mean strip shows or anything. It was more of kind of a musical dance thing. Lydia Thompson performed something called Bluebeard, and in that there was a song called If Ever I Cease to Love. It's been kind of written that this was kind of a spontaneous thing, that she came and they said, let's make this our anthem. Actually, she had played in New Orleans several times. She was well known. Some of the Rex officers were actually familiar with her. And the song, If Ever I Cease to Love, was well known too, because the way songs were made known by that time was through music sheets and where you went by it. And that was a fairly popular thing. The newspaper had even done a satire of that song. Another entertainer who was in town at the time was Lotta Crabtree, who was from San Francisco, who had been a big child star and who had made a lot of money. And so she was in town. Maybe the most famous person for that time was Dan Rice. Dan Rice had a circus called Dan Rice's Circus. He had a lot of horses, and a lot of the horses that were used in the Rex Parade were Dan Rice's horses. Okay? The anecdote to Dan Rice is he was a gaunt man with a goatee, and the rumor is that Thomas Nast was a friend, and he had used him as a model for his illustration of Uncle Sam. And so essentially, Uncle Sam was here the first time. And then the name that would live on in history was George Armstrong Custer, who had escorted the Grand Duke on his tour. And we all know how that ended. But at the time, he was probably the biggest name. And so there was a lot of celebrities. And just one more, guy named Lawrence Barrett, who was a Shakespearean, who was performing Richard III. And when they were getting the parade together, they realized that they didn't have a king's costume. So they went to Lawrence Barrett, hey, can we borrow your king's costume, your Richard III costume? And he said, yeah. And so the first Rex was dressed as Richard III. So that was his contribution.
Arthur, moving on to something completely different. There is a Mardi Gras economic impact study this year.
Yes, it's the fourth time that Professor Tony WYES has done an economic impact study. This was funded by New Orleans and Company and the Mayor's Mardi Gras Advisory Council. How much money does Mardi Gras pump? And as Tony admits, it's impossible to really know, but she came up with a number of nearly $900 million is pumped into the economy each year. And the biggest takeaway from that, 3% of the city's gross domestic product, is for every dollar the city spends, it gets $2.64 back. So Mardi Gras makes money for the city. We all know it's more than just that, but that's pretty big.
That's pretty big, goodness. Well now, my goodness, this is one of my favorite parts of the show, which has been flying by here. The list, it's whatever they want it to be. And we're going to start with Daryl and your top 6 Mardi Gras Indian songs.
Yeah, you know, the top most heard Mardi Gras songs are rhythm and blues songs of New Orleans. There's a whole other category of the Indian songs, and there's a little bit of crossover between some of the performers, but the Indian songs have kind of a distinctive sound. These lists are not in particular order except for the final two, which I'll mention, okay? But a song called, many people probably have never heard it, but it's called Corey Died on the Battlefield. And what I like about this song is that it kind of tells you a little bit of the history of Mardi Gras, because the early crews saw themselves at war with other crews. Now, that kind of symbolic rule, that kind of thing. Usually the battlefield was people dancing with each other. And when you hear about the spy boy was going out to spot other tribes. But
And let's hear a little bit of that.
Okay.
Corey died on the battlefield. Corey died on a battlefield. Corey died on the...
Air, of course, that's the Wild Magnolias, isn't it?
That was the Wild Magnolias. Yeah. Oh, yeah, they were the early pioneers in this kind of music. Another song was called, again, it goes back to this whole chief thing. It was called Indian Red. It's a traditional song, not by an Indian, but by a beloved early jazz musician, Danny Barker.
The pretty monogram pointers and they don't bow down. They don't bow down on nobody's ground. Nobody's ground. Oh, how we love to hear you call us Indian Red.
Next up?
Okay. Along the same theme, Earl King did a thing called Big Chief. And this is, you hear a lot every year with that great opening, and it's really impossible not to keep still to this.
Well, let's hear that.
Me big chief, I'm feeling good. Me big chief, I got him tried. Got my star right by my side. My playboy, he just went by.
And then next on the list, okay, this is where it gets a little complicated, but these are some of the great songs. Hey, Pockway, which was done by the Meters, all right? It's a song you still hear a lot today, very popular. And the Meters, of course, are tied in with the Neville Brothers, and so it's part of that uptown Mardi Gras Indian sound.
It's good for the body, yeah, and it's good for your soul. Get it now, hey, 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 Pockway.
All right, now to the top two. Giacomo. Okay, this song, its origin is unclear, its meaning is unclear, but it all had to do with Indians and the culture of the Indians. The original was done by Sugar Boy and the Cane Cutters.
Giacomo Filo Handande, Giacomo Pinane. Oh, look at my queen all dressed in red. Hiko, Hiko, Hande.
The Dixie Cups later would do another edition of it and call it Iko Iko. this is one of the great songs in all of Mardi Gras. And there is, if y'all go to YouTube, look up Iko Iko by the Dixie Cups. And the story is that there were the recording sessions somewhere else. In between breaks, these are all girls from New Orleans, and they were just talking about the songs from New Orleans, and they got like an ashtray, whatever they had, and they started making this rhythm sound. And then this beat came up, and they started playing. Well, the people in the recording studio rolled the tape, and they came out and said, "This is so great, we're going to make it into a song." If you all remember Rain Man, that the opening theme, which had nothing to do with the story, but it began with Iko, but it's really one of the great songs.
And here's a brief segment.
Grandma told your grandma, I'm gonna set your flag on fire. You're talking about hey now, hey now, Iko, Iko, ande, Giacomo Fino, anane, Giacomo Finane.
Okay, and this is where it gets a little complicated because it's linked sometimes with the other songs, but it's Honda Wanda. And I put this on the list because it's by Bo Dallas of the Wild Magnolias. Bo Dallas, you should listen to this just to see what a real Mardi Gras Indian sounded like, kind of like that gravelly, loud voice. I mean, he was certainly one of the all-time important Mardi Gras Indians.
Isn't it just nice to hear these songs every year? They come back and they remind us just how special all that music is.
It survived, and I mean, there's carnivals all over the world, but I doubt if there are any other that have their own set of songs that emerge on the battlefields when they're sitting, and they're great. But they did inspire a lot of the other rhythm and blues songs.
Thank you so much. And turning to Arthur.
Well, I have a strange list. After 38 years,
That's a good one.
I'm running out of ideas. But this one's called "Why Can't We Find?" The early newspaper illustrations of parades in American newspapers. The earliest thing I've ever found, or anyone's ever found, is the Second Comus Parade, an illustration in 1858 in the London Illustrated Daily News. Why there in May? How did that image get there, and why is it there? Nothing in American newspapers until 1872, with the first Rex. And there were parades then, and you just wonder why somebody didn't sketch something and print it. We may never know. Accurate media coverage of Black Carnival in New Orleans. You research African American Carnival, and at best you have oral history, which isn't worth the paper it's printed on, as they say. We just can't get the kind of information we need or documentation because, sadly, mainstream media did not cover it at all. Fortunately, when Louisiana Weekly came around in the 1920s, then we had accurate coverage. But their files have not been digitized, so they need to get a grant or something so people who are trying to research can get accurate information. I've always wondered why, if the Grand Duke was such a big deal, and he was in 1872, why don't we have any photos of him? Traveled the United States, 3 months, 32 cities. Every place he went, he was treated with royalty. Why didn't somebody take a picture of him here? Well, we found out somebody did. There was a studio in Canal Street called Washburn's, and this guy was big-time photographer. He'd photographed Jefferson Davis, the opera star Jenny Lind when she was in town in 1850. Anybody big who came to town sat for Mr. Washburn. And we found out that on Ash Wednesday, the day after his parade, the first Rex parade, he did go to the studio, and 6 portraits were taken of him. Custer was there, some pictures were taken of him. Where are they? I've searched worldwide, cannot find them.
He was a young man. Because of the Grand Duke, people think he might have been some kind of senior official.
No.
Right. And we've got 2 more?
Yes, 2 more quickly. Brex has issued favors for years, but no one has ever found a 1901 favor. And I have a picture of what we believe is one, but if it's real, I'd surely like to know if it was. And lastly, I have a collection of Rex ducal badges. Each year, the members get a ducal badge. Can't find one from 1879. We know they exist. I've seen 3 of them. And if I can get that one,
you want it.
I've got them all. So if you have one, I got my checkbook ready.
All right. Well, before we say goodbye, though, we want to remind you that once again this year, WYES is the place to catch more than a dozen documentaries and specials about Carnival history. On February 3rd, our station will present 7 hours of Carnival programming. Our Mardi Gras Marathon begins at 3 p.m. and includes the documentary documentaries, Mardi Gras, The Passing Parade, All on a Mardi Gras Day, Blaine Kern, they call him Mr. Mardi Gras, and many more. Check WYES.org for a complete schedule and the schedule of other Carnival programs all season long. Also, another new show debuts on WYES. This Mardi Gras season, Masked for Battle, Mardi Gras Indian culture confronting COVID. It captures the stories of black masking Indians devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic, but equally determined to persevere and preserve the Indian traditions. This is the latest in a series of documentaries produced by The Ohio State University at Newark. It airs several times during the month of February, beginning Saturday, February 3rd. And just a quick reminder that WYES will once again present the 2024 Rex Ball and the Meeting of the Courts of Rex and the Mystic Crew of Comus. Mardi Gras night, February 13th, will sign on at 7 p.m. It will be shown at WYES TV, streamed on WYES.org, WYES and PBS apps, and on WYES's YouTube channel. And of course, earlier that day, we'll show lots and lots of Carnival-related programming. Now we leave you with rare footage of the 1949 Rex Parade. The theme was Louisiana, Utopia of the South. And you will hear the anthem of Carnival, If Ever I Cease to Love, as sung by Edmond Doc Souchon with Johnny Wiggs and his New Orleans Kings. Thank you so much, Errol and Arthur. Thank you for watching, and happy Mardi Gras.
In the street, in the lane, in the road. Turn to the left on the right hand, you'll see there my true love's abode. I go there courting and going to my love like a little old dove, and swearing on my bended knees, never I cease to love. May sheephead grows on apple trees, never I cease to love. If ever I cease to love, God help me, if ever I cease to love, may the moon be turned to green, green cheese, if ever I cease to love.
The New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation promotes, preserves, and perpetuates music, culture, and heritage through programs, cultural, educational, and economic activities year-round. Learn more at jazzandheritage.org. The American Italian Cultural Center and Museum on South Peters in New Orleans offers event venue space, Italian language classes, dual citizenship and translation services, seminars, genealogy, and trips to Italy. Ciao! AmericanItalianCulturalCenter.com. This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.